a crown is made of metal and jewels. If Emirates is the jewel and Fly Dubai is maybe the emerald, we are perhaps the gold in the crown, and together we make a perfect industry that hopefully will lead the world.
They love a superlative, don't we? Here, the tallest building in the world, the tallest hotel in the world, the biggest this, the biggest that. Do you think you'll be able to sell the most expensive slot in the world?
I don't think the slots will be actually that expensive, because actually our aeronautical charges are incredibly reasonable. We are about 1/8 of the charge that you have to land a 777 at Heathrow, for example. And our aim is always to make aviation affordable in Dubai, because we want the 104 airlines we've got to actually come here and get great service at a reasonable price. The idea is we've got to be the engine of growth, and you can't be that if you've overpriced your aviation infrastructure.
Dubai Airport is the busiest international airport for the 11th year in a row, and they have just announced that they expect to hit 95.3 million passengers by the end of this year. That's a new record. But the ambition doesn't stop there. Within the next 2 years, they hope to be at 100 million passengers. Maybe you've hubbed through Dubai on your way to Hong Kong, on your way to Australia. Maybe you stopped over. A lot more people are doing that. Or maybe you're one of the 4 million people that has taken up residency in Dubai, in the Emirate. We broke that number a little bit earlier in this summer. I'm pleased to say the man that has shepherded that growth for the past 18 years, his name is Paul Griffiths, the CEO, joins us today for the launch edition of the Inside Brief. Thank you for joining me.
It's a great pleasure, Manus. Good to be here.
So look, those superlatives roll off the tongue. They are huge. This has gone way beyond revenge tourism. Where are we at in the evolution of Dubai Airport?
Well, we really have only scratched the surface of the ambition, because by 2050, we hope to have an airport capable of welcoming 260 million guests. I mean, that's beyond ambition. I mean, the largest airport by any measure at the moment is Atlanta, with about 105 million. So we are going way beyond the limitations of existing airport infrastructure. And the challenge for us, of course, is what we need is to make sure at that scale we can still deliver the customer experience that people have gone to know and love about our airport and our city. Airports are so important because they are the most significant first and last impression that we leave on people that come to the city. And some of them, frankly, are pretty terrible at that. But why don't people think about that? We're ambassadors for the country, and we never forget that in Dubai.
I mean, I've been coming here since 1994, and I remember when there was a darkness to the left-hand side of Shakespeare Road, the main route between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. What is it that makes Dubai, I would say we've moved to beyond an aspiration holiday destination to an aspiration destination to live? What do you think's going on there?
Having a holistic vision, having a vision which is as relevant and is key today to the economic development of the city as it was more than 55 years ago. That's the reason why we've been able to stick to this agenda and deliver such great magnitude of not just infrastructure, but careers for people, social development, 150,000 hospitality beds now in the city, which people are regularly occupying at well over 90%. And that's all worked fantastically because we've set our sights on being the world's number one, got there, and are doing it again.
And the numbers there are ambitious, 200 million by 2050. Look, you're talking about moving this airport, for those people who are tuning in and listening in, you're talking about moving the busiest international hub in the world, nearly 40 kilometers south of where you are at the moment to DWC. This has never been done before. I don't think you just flick a switch, Paul, do you? What's the biggest risk from that ambition and that transition?
Well, clearly, the city depends on having a very active 24/7 airport and airline operation. And we can't turn that off That's got to keep going. So it's going to have to be a very, very detailed plan. And we're already working on that. We've got a concept of operations plan, which is being formulated now for the move in 2032. And we will have to be very, very slick and allow nothing to go wrong. We'll probably have to clear the roads, both sides, to move all the equipment over and do it in the fastest possible time. I can't say how long, but I remember in Hong Kong when they moved from the site in Kowloon to the new airport at Chek Lap Kok, that actually moved overnight. Of course, it was only about 24 million people at the time, so it was probably less than a quarter of what we're going to be moving in 2032. So it will be a logistics program par excellence that we will have to plan for as long as it needs to be able to be planned and then execute perfectly one time only.
So let's break this down a little bit then. So you've got this amazing airport, which I've got to say, I've traveled a lot in the past couple of years. You're still at the top of the pile. I can assure you of that. What happens to that DXB airport, Paul? Is it going to be a real estate, developer's dream to bid for?
Well, I think the thing is there are many options, and obviously the government will consider what options are best for it. I mean, the good thing, and again, the similarity with Hong Kong, when they moved the airport, all of that location then was able to be developed for high-rise buildings, which you obviously can't do at the moment. So the land development potential for the site is absolutely enormous. And there are various discussions going on about whether we have a transport interchange, which I think will be part of whatever development happens. But ultimately, it's probably the least of our priorities at the moment. The biggest priority is getting the new field completed in time for the move, because by the time we get to 2031, we'll be at least 114 million customers. And the existing DXB infrastructure will be pretty maxed out. You'll see the bulges start appearing in the windows.
That sounds ominous. How do you manage that? Because you've got to keep the flow of us going through DXB. And I've been there recently, and you've got this beautiful red channel that I was not allowed to go through, Paul. But you've got that momentum up to 114, as you say, and balancing that. How do you balance the investment at DXB to keep us flowing quickly with ambition for DWC?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the old answer years ago would be when you run out of capacity, you build something, right? Now, we don't have the luxury of the space to be able to create more airport infrastructure. In fact, we've grown 22% in the last 10 years without the delivery of major airport infrastructure. So that wasn't an option. And it's very, very interesting, isn't it, how, the human mind becomes the most inventive when you actually back someone into a corner and say, well, you can't use conventional means of expansion. But actually, I think what we've come up with is quite an ingenious solution, and it's enabled by the technology that exists today. And what we've been able to do is work out that not many people that I've met, and there are some geeks who are exempted from this statement, want to spend more time at an airport. What we want to do is get in quickly, go and sit down in the lounge, maybe have a meal or a drink, go and buy something, and then we want to get on our way. And we want to be reassured that our aeroplane is there waiting for us, not very far away, and the whole stress of a normal airport environment is removed. And what we decided is we try and make that a frictionless experience. So with biometrics now, you can take one biometric signature, you can do it from a long way away, very discreetly, and that biometric signature eventually will cover all of those processes that we put people through that have been in existence for too long now in airports. So check-in, dealing with baggage, going through security, dealing with immigration, dealing with customs. Hopefully, they'll become processes that are done in the background without us even knowing about them. Now, the byproduct of that is fantastic, because if you can get people through in a quarter the time, you get happier customers. They spend more time interfacing with your retail and commercial offer. They can, sit in the lounge, enjoy their time there. And of course, if we've got 4 times the people going through the same space, you've got 4 times the capacity without having built anything. And of course, capital intensity in infrastructure projects is a big problem, and it's going up very, very quickly.
So that's about the product. That's really about productivity in the current space that you have. Listen, tell me this, because when I used to live downtown, it was beautiful. Hop in the car, DXB, 20 minutes, boom, into the lounge and out. I'm just curious. They're doubling the size of what's called the DISC, the equivalent of the City of London, downtown, financial, Burj Khalifa. You've got Dubai Mall. I'm just curious, have there been any complaints about you lifting the airport and moving it 40 kilometers away? Because it's not going to make it easier for the financiers.
That's probably true, but I think if you look at the development of the city, of course, the city can only develop to the south because that's where the land is. And I think the epicenter of Dubai will gradually shift to the south as a result of that. You know, if you live on the Palm, for example, it's closer to get to DWC, Al Maktoum International, than it is to get to DXB. And actually, with the traffic at the moment, it's certainly quicker to get there. So there will be some advantages. And I think also a lot of businesses will start to shift. There's so much development land there, so much building and development. There'll be housing there. I mean, one of the things I think is really important is that we try and solve the problem of lots of people living in more reasonable accommodation in Sharjah doing the commute into Dubai, because that's clogging up the road system. So if there's more affordable housing around the new airports, then clearly people can live and work very close together. And I think we're going to have to start as a city to look more at those sort of zoning ideas to limit the traffic on the roads. I think the other thing, of course, is the infrastructure of the city does need to develop, and what we desperately need is a metro system. I mean, in Hong Kong, when they put the MTR in, for example, they built vast cities over the top of all the stations so people could live very comfortably, very close to a metro station. And that's been very successfully adopted in places like Singapore, and of course been there for hundreds of years in places like London and Paris. So we need a proper metro solution that's engineered for the needs of the city of the future.
And is that all actively, I mean, we have got an expansion of the metro system here underway, but to meet your needs at DWC, is that going to be accelerated? Is that infrastructure and access, you know, is that probably top of the priority in terms of the complementary side of developing DWC?
Well, the reason an airport exists, of course, is to provide an interface between a journey that is airborne with a journey that's on the surface of the Earth. So if you don't do that well, you're failing at the very basic points of what an airport exists to actually achieve. So obviously the infrastructure interface between roads and rail is going to be very, very important indeed. And we've got to make sure that they're both close and they're easy. And if we can avoid things like level changes, so we can get straight from the railway into the airport without having to check. I mean, if I had my way, I'd take the train right to the plane. So you just literally get off at the station, go straight into the lounge, and then onto the plane. Wouldn't that be fantastic?
How far away are we from that? I mean, that's like very futuristic, but then we thought a lot of things were futuristic. Is that such a futuristic idea?
I don't think it's that futuristic. When you look at the technology now for security and immigration, and everything is so much more easy to do and effortless. I mean, look at how difficult it was to go and buy a book in a bookstore. Now you just one click on your account and the book arrives the next day. I mean, it's incredible what technology has done to change the world. And I think in the airport space, we're overdue for a revolution.
It's Jeff Bezos, and the equivalent is, of course, Paul Griffiths. And when you think of some of the numbers, Paul, 5 runways, 400 gates at DWC. And so the immediate thing that goes through my mind, Heathrow can barely build a 3rd runway. What is the bidding like? Is there already a bit of a bidding frenzy for slots at the new airport? Are you pushing people to, if you're going to bid for DWC?
Well, very fortunately, we've found ways to keep the capacity staircase at DXB very much alive. And obviously, when the pandemic was at its height, a lot of airlines weren't operating. So we're still building up the schedule at DXB. So there's some capacity still available. But of course, remember that DWC Al Maktoum International first opens its doors in 2010. So we've been operating mainly for cargo and executive jets there. So there is a terminal building there, which will accommodate a lot of services. So gradually, as DXB continues to fill up, we'll generally start to move some of the services out to DWC from DXB to make space for carriers like Emirates that are so dependent on DXB for their hub, and Fly Dubai as well, that they have to stay at DXB till the last moment, because the efficacy of the hub has to maintain its integrity at DXB. So there will be a gradual movement, and we do see by 2032 for the move, the total traffic between DWC at 10 million and DXB at 114 will be 124 by the time we move. So that new airport capacity by then will be 150 million. So we'll still have a bit of headroom to grow.
They love a superlative, don't we, here? The tallest building in the world, the tallest hotel in the world, the biggest this, the biggest that. Do you think you'll be able to sell the most expensive slot in the world?
I don't think the slots will be actually that expensive, because actually our aeronautical charges are incredibly reasonable. We are about 1/8 of the charge that you have to land a 777 at Heathrow, for example. And our aim is always to make aviation affordable in Dubai, because we want the 104 airlines we've got to actually come here and get great service at a reasonable price. You know, the idea is we've got to be the engine of growth, and you can't be that if you've overpriced your aviation infrastructure.
I mean, when it comes to personifying the engine of growth, if Emirates is the jewel in the crown, what is DXB? What is Dubai Airport?
I think, that it's a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? If you don't, a crown is made of metal and jewels. If Emirates is the jewel and Fly Dubai is maybe the emerald, we are perhaps the gold in the crown, and together we make a perfect industry that hopefully will lead the world.
Just looking at the numbers, I mean, aviation as a whole, so that's you, Emirates, the services, everybody that's in there. We're just looking at the data. You're 27% of the GDP of Dubai. That's $37 billion. And I just sit back and was thinking, 18 years of being part of that. Is that pressure? Is that pride? How does that feel on a good day and a bad day?
Well, the great thing is that no 2 days are ever the same. And I don't think I've ever had a moment of boredom. I mean, every single day, even if you plan the day to the nth minute, it doesn't ever turn out to be anything like I plan in the morning. And the diversity of the challenge and the increasing complexity of it, it just keeps the old grey matter swirling around in my head. And hopefully there's more solutions than there are problems every day.
Look, every now and then you and I have gotten together at various moments in the calendar. I've had the pleasure of meeting Sheikh Ahmed, who's part of your organization, and stewardship, so Tim Clark. Tell me how the leadership of Dubai, how active are they in the decision to move to DWC? How active are they in the pressure on you as a CEO? Just paint a picture for our listeners and for our viewers on running a business that size in Dubai.
Well, it's very interesting. On my first day in the job, I arrived on the 27th of September 2007. I walked into Sheikh Ahmed's office next to mine, and I said, "Your Highness, I've arrived. What would you like me to do?"
I say that every day at work, Paul.
Anyway, and he said to me, "Just one thing." And I thought, this will be interesting. And it was. And that was, just don't constrain the growth of aviation in Dubai. And if you think about it, those few words sum up the ambition, the absolute tenacity, the vision, the direct straight line that we have to steer to get towards that vision. And I just thought, having one KPI as a CEO, and it's pretty clear if you succeed or fail, isn't it, really? And I think continuing that growth trajectory, making sure that whether we've done it through technology or people or process or building more infrastructure, we've kept that growth theme constantly alive through thick and thin. I mean, through the global financial crisis, through COVID, through all sorts of adversity, we've just kept focus on the goal. And the thing is, because the politics and the political strategy has been so clear and so single-minded, you always know where you are. So
do you ever get a call late in the evening just with a shift in direction?
I've never been told to do anything different, and that's the great thing about it. You know what the answer is even before the question is asked, and that, I think, makes it very, very clear. We know what the ambition is. We know the number of aeroplanes that are on order. I think when I first came to Dubai, Emirates had 80 A380s on order, and it was absolutely clear, unless the airport undertook some major changes, there was no way that we were going to be able to accommodate an operation that would work. But over time, what we've been able to do is refine things and adapt things and bring the necessary expertise in and train people. Actually, that's been one big part of the role, is to actually develop the skills of the local employee base that we've got now to become self-sufficient. And that, I think, as a legacy, will probably be the thing that I'll be the most proud of.
Well, 18 years, I mean, not many global CEOs are in the seat for 18 years. And you mentioned some of those moments, the oil crash of 2014, the GFC. I mean, you arrived just ahead of some of the biggest collapses of American banks in history, COVID, which we both lived through and interviewed through, and recent wars. Which was the toughest period?
Well, it was interesting. When I arrived, the program was very much, fix DXB, open Terminal 3, get the development of the infrastructure there on a trajectory where it was going to be delivered on time and to a quality and operational flexibility that provided that growth that was clearly at the top of the tree. But also the way ahead for DWC was fairly clear at that time. Work was in progress, construction had started, first runway was being finished, and the first terminal was available, and we opened for cargo in 2010. But you see, the global financial crisis changed things a bit, because suddenly liquidity was tricky globally, and therefore the ability to develop such an ambitious infrastructure project was slightly less than, unfortunately, we thought it was a year earlier. So I remember Sheikh Ahmed coming to me and saying, you talked about DXB development and what the potential was. And of course, I'd run Gatwick Airport in the UK, so I knew how to, make the most of very little capital investment and a very hostile planning and development environment. So I'd got that sort of ability to, make something out of nothing. So what we did is we launched a plan called SP 2020, which was to create enough capacity at DXB for us to take a pause in the capital investment in DWC at the time and still deliver 90 million capacity by 2020. Unfortunately, we didn't succeed. We achieved the 90 million capacity by 2018. So we got there 2 years ahead of schedule, which was a great achievement by everyone. And of course, here we are, 2025, 95.3 million. We've even surpassed that 90 million capacity we created for 2020. So again, the ingenuity of the team in coming up with an alternative plan under the circumstances, which considerably lowered the capital intensity of the project, but at the same time continued to deliver that unconstrained growth that was in my single KPI. That was quite an achievement, I think.
Now, we've had the pleasure of doing interviews, I think, for almost 6 to 8 years, taking out a couple that I fluttered off to New York for. And we always get to the IPO question, so we'll give it a new go. I've just finished covering ADNOC's 6 subsidiary companies, and they were, exalting the dividend payout program for 6 subsidiary companies. Does that put a bit more pressure on Dubai to really think about some kind of crystallizing moment for DXB Airports?
Whether it is or not, that's not in my head. That's in the head of those that are far higher up in the hierarchy than I am. I mean, clearly, as I've always said, Manus, airports are an attractive proposition. We have PE ratios I think, in the 20s, which are very, very attractive. And, if we were ever the subject of an IPO, I'm sure it would be successful.
Do you think there'd be a huge foreign demand for an asset like that, Paul, if we ever get to that day?
Well, if you look at the airports that have gone through IPO around the world, a lot of them have attracted institutional investors on an international scale. I mean, if you look at the composition of Heathrow, it's got a huge amount of foreign investment, Qatari, Saudi, etc., Canadian, I think, as well. So there's been a lot of institutional investment in airports because they are seen as blue chip utilities and fairly dependable in terms of their delivery of constant turnover and profitability.
Let's talk a little bit more about you, because there's many interesting facets to the Paul Griffiths, a musician who's played in some of the grandest churches and halls in the world, but also a collector of cars and bikes. Where do you marry music and petrolhead? Let's start with the petrolhead first of all. Where is your passion in cars, and is that what keeps you sane?
I think it does keep me sane. I mean, my problem is that I've been a hoarder from very early age. And I think it was because we lived in a pretty small house. Whenever I used to go away with the Scouts on holiday or somewhere, she used to take great pride in clearing out my bedroom and throwing out a load of stuff. So I used to come home, find the walls bare, and most of my toys gone.
But now you're hoarding a different type of toys now.
That's right. I definitely am. I've always been interested in transportation in all its forms from an early age, and I used to have books about things, and my father used to take me to Heathrow Airport, and I'd sit on the roof of his car and watch the early jets take off. And that fascination has always been there. And, when I was born, the story goes that my father disappeared the afternoon after I'd come into the world, went to the local toy store, bought a train set for me, of course, and then set up in one of our spare bedrooms at home. We had a small house. We only had 3 bedrooms, but he managed to find the space to build quite a significant railway layout. And guess what? When my first son was born, I absented myself from the hospital, went down to the local toy shop and bought a train set for my son. So it's carrying on through the generations. It's got to epic proportions now, and space is a massive problem.
So now you don't just hoard your average kind of collectible, do you? For you, it's, as I understand it, it ranges anything from Ducatis to fast cars to maybe even a Harrier jump jet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think it's mostly because I keep meeting people that inspire me to do things. I mean, when I think just after I'd gone to Dubai, I met someone who lives not far from me, and he used to be in the Royal Air Force. He's a fantastic engineer, and he'd just left the motor trade, and he'd set up in his garage at home, restoring motorcycles to the most fantastic standard imaginable. Now, when I was 16 or 17, I mean, I used to look, that was in the mid-70s, and the Japanese motorcycle invasion of Europe had just started, and all these incredibly exotic machines painted in these gorgeous metal flake colors were appearing in mauves and brown and yellow and bright blue, and they were just so gorgeous. I mean, when you consider, we used to go along on these old British bikes who looked as though they'd been designed in the First World War. You can imagine the impacts that had on a 17-year-old. And of course, I loved all these things, and I could only afford, by working very hard, to have just one. So I bought my first Honda SS50. It was so slow. I used to get overtaken by falling leaves.
But you don't get overtaken anymore now, Paul.
No, I don't.
What have you got? What's in the loader?
Well, you see, the thing is, I started buying on various auction sites and from people that I got to know, old wrecks that they'd had in their garages for not much money. And I'd give them to my friend Paul, and I'd say, there you go, here's this wreck of a bike. And 3 months later, he'd phone me up and say, come and see what I've created. And he'd make these things look better than the day they'd come out of the factory. And he did that once, then he did it a second time. And then I said, look, I don't want you to work for anyone else. can I take you on full time? And so probably for about the last 16 years, he's worked exclusively for me. I now have over 200 vehicles, and I've collected cars as well. He's been very helpful with that regard as well. So gradually the collection has grown, and I've got some wonderful examples of the most exotic machinery that I used to drool over when I was a teenager. It's been very, very fortunate. The problem I've now got is I don't have the space to show them all, so I'm trying my hardest to put a project together to put them all in one place.
And we look forward to seeing that. Paul, I want to wrap up. It's interesting you talk about how you grew up, where you grew up, going to the Scouts. If I was to say to you what has made you the leader and CEO that you are today, how much of that goes back to how you grew up?
I think quite a bit of it. And I don't know whether it's just in my DNA. I always wanted to do something that was not just run-of-the-mill. I think my father used to say to me, why do you bother playing the organ? You'll never pay the gas bill with the money you get from that. Go and get yourself a proper job. Go and be something respectable like a bank clerk. And I thought it was the worst advice that anyone could ever give. And it's not advice I'd give to anyone else. I'd say, find something you're passionate about and then worry about how you might make a living out of it later. And I really do think I was very, very fortunate to have some very inspiring people. I mean, Sir Richard Branson, for example, was a great person to work for, and he saw the world differently. And when I see leaders like that, inspiring people that work for them to do extraordinary things, I think that is the most valuable lesson about leadership that anyone could ever learn.
And where's been the best place that you played that organ? Go on, tell our audience.
Well,
I know there's been many, but
Westminster Abbey was wonderful. I played the Duruflé suite there. I set myself a task of learning it. No one thought I could ever do it, so that was another reason to make sure I could. I've played in St. John the Divine in New York, which is a fantastic venue. I suppose icing on the cake, certainly here, was playing for Pope Francis during the papal visit to Abu Dhabi. I think the Sheikh Zayed Stadium was absolutely at capacity, and I probably had a bigger audience than U2 has ever had, so that was great. 4th of July 2027 will probably be the crowning glory of my organ playing moments. I've been asked to go and play in Notre Dame in Paris, so I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, Paul, I hope we catch up before you play that particular concert. Paul Griffiths, the CEO of Dubai Airports, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.